What is happening, everyone? Welcome back to another action-packed edition of CPA Reviewed, the official podcast of another71.com. As always, I am your official host, Jeff Elliott, a licensed CPA in the state of Kansas, by the grace of God, and to the chagrin of many. Happy Wednesday to you. Today is Wednesday, I almost said April, August 3rd, 2016. It is score release day. So technically, score release day is August 4th, but we all know that the scores come out the night before. So happy score release day to you. And I hope your score, if you're waiting on a score, I hope it comes out in a timely fashion and north of 75. So going on right now, we have the podcast, we have the video, and we are also on Facebook Live for better or worse. And so going to answer some questions. If you have a question, you can go to another71.com, click in the upper right-hand corner, click Ask Jeff, and it will appear in a featured edition of the podcast. And I'm also broadcasting, as I mentioned, on Facebook Live. It's my new thing, which means I'll do it twice and then stop. So at least I'm consistent. So, and it's live, and so who knows what will happen. Which also means that I'm extra nervous and will probably be drinking a lot. And I've already gotten a message that says that I smack my lips too much. And so I'm also working on that. So less lip smacking in this one, I promise. All right, first question. If you have a question, you can submit it on Facebook Live, and I will get to it. In the meantime, I will answer questions from Ask Jeff. You know, you could start a drinking game every time I smack my lips. I think everyone would be drunk by the third question. Muzam writes in, I passed BEC last year in June. Since then, I've attempted auditing 3 times, scoring 69, 61, and 74, and also attempting regulation once, scoring a 70. I'm at the lowest point of my CPA journey now when I scored a 70 in regulation and a 74 in auditing in a span of 2 months. My 18th month period is about to be expired as of November 30th, 2016. I will lose my BEC credit. I am in dire need of some expert guidance to help me through. How do you suggest I plan my next attempts for auditing and regulation? I seem confident doing the MCQs, but when it comes to simulations, they look like my weak point in every exam, as they always ask questions which I never even practiced. Second question, how can I prepare for these task-based simulations? And should I attempt auditing and regulation both this August and the early September window now and save time to pass FAR on my first attempt, which is my biggest challenge, so that I have any chance of saving BEC? Okay, well, the first thing I'll say is that losing a section is not the end of the world. I lost my FAR credit after scoring back-to-back 74s on regulation, so it's not the end of the world. And so you don't want to plan your next 2 months or so. You do want to plan it with the motivation of not losing BEC, but you don't want to do something foolish and try to study for auditing and regulation and end up at the same time and end up passing neither. So what I would do is I would study all of August and I would take auditing early September, and then I would take regulation mid-October, and I would take FAR just before Thanksgiving. And then if you pass, you pass and you're done. And hopefully, if you don't pass all 3, hopefully you can knock out 2 or 3 of those. So, and again, if you're on Facebook Live, shoot me a message, say, hey. Mandy says, hey Jeff, I bought your MCQ. I was wondering, do your notes reflect the MCQ from a simpler form instead of me taking my own notes from the question? regardless of whether or not you use Ninja Notes or not, I would still take your own notes over the MCQs because whatever question you miss, or if it's a question that you think that if it's a question that you got right but kind of guessed and you want to see it again later, I would write down that little nugget. And so when it's all said and done, your notes of the MCQ will be custom tailored for you versus something that I wrote or someone else wrote. And so it will be more impactful for you. Xavier, or is it Xavier? There was a basketball player named Xavier Henry. Hello, Jeff. I'm a senior getting my undergrad, and I want to start focusing on the CPA exam, specifically the FAR portion. Aside from my intermediate accounting textbook, I don't have any resources. What do you recommend for someone who is literally starting today? Your prices and ratings have convinced me to try Ninja, but specifically, what should I do? Where should I start? I got a 99 in my 4111 class, so I don't know what class that is. It must be intermediate accounting. So I like to think I have have a strong background. Okay, well, starting today, so I would just follow the Ninja framework, nail the concepts, nail the videos, depending on if you go with Ninja, it'd be nail the concepts because it's the book and not the videos. But so nail the concepts, take intense notes, and then do nonstop multiple choice questions. Then just rewrite your notes, and then it all comes together. That's your final week review, and so taking FAR, I would study for 7 to 8 weeks. So budget your time accordingly. Leave 2 weeks out, rewrite your notes. 1 week out, that's your final review section. And so starting today, that's what I would do. If you scored that well in your accounting class or whatever, that should tell you that you have the work ethic to study for FAR and study for the CPA exam in general. But don't let that be a false sense of security that you maybe don't need to spend as much time on it, because people every day who score really well in college walk into the exam and they stumble out because they underestimated how tough it is if you don't study. The CPA exam is more about your work ethic and how intense you study versus how smart you are, or how smart you were at some point. Omar on Facebook Live, scores are released tonight, aren't they? And Thomas says yes. So in theory, they come out tonight. You never know, but they are scheduled to come out. Hopefully we won't have another server gate. We haven't had a server gate in a while. Scott says, I just applied for the CPA exam, and I work for a company that will reimburse the Wiley CPA Excel Gold review upon passing. When I was looking at what was included, it didn't seem to have the MCQs or notes. For this question, I did look, and that package does include both, by the way. I've been telling my friends about your site, and I'm wondering what would be the best way to go. Even if my company pays for Wiley CPA Excel, it's only after I pass. So my question is, does Ninja CPA Review 10-point combo cover the material in the exams for my reading? It does. Yes, it is. It is comprehensive enough to be a standalone study course and flexible enough to plug into any course you use. So it comes down to, sounds like Wiley is free, but it comes down to which one do you want to study with more, which one excites you to study more. So it's hard to pass up free. But I still think you should check out the Ninja 10-point combo. And you should get both. Okay. All right. 2-part question, and they are related. Cindy says, I'm retaking FAR this fall, but going back, it made me realize how very broad this topic is. It makes it hard to focus. I'm taking the Wiley test bank on top of your review. but it hasn't helped so far. Any suggestions on how to break it down? Maybe get further readings on subjects such as the statement of financial concepts. Maybe take a practice test first and see what to study on. And then the piggyback question, Jeffrey says, I just purchased the 10-point combo for BEC and FAR. I applied for my NTS and plan to take both next window. I haven't taken the test since '07 and had trouble with the simulations. And also BEC was just multiple choice back then. How can I best use your materials to focus on these? So the answer to both of these questions is fairly similar. So FAR is very broad. It's been said it's a mile wide and an inch deep. So how do you break it down? What I would do is whatever course you are using. So Jeffrey's using the 10-point combo. So for instance, let's say that you want to study 7 to 8 weeks for FAR. I would take the number of pages in the FAR Ninja book, and I would try to get through that within 2 weeks. So you'll have to budget your time. You need to get through X number of pages a day. Then I would spend 2 weeks on Ninja MCQ and using that as an extension of your reading. It's not testing your information. It's not testing your comprehension. Comprehension is part of your overall studying and learning. And then, so that's 4 weeks. I would spend a week rewriting your notes. So rewriting the notes that you took over the book and the MCQ. You can also rewrite the Ninja notes if you want to. So that's 6 weeks, and then spend a week to a week and a half doing your final review. So that's 7.5 to 8 weeks. So if you find, like Cindy, that you're not grasping things, I would try to get through the book or your videos as quickly as possible and try to get as much information that you can out of them and take notes and put them away, and then pick up your conceptual slack, so to speak, in the multiple choice, and let the multiple choice teach you the things that you are weak on, because you can spend forever in a book and you don't really know how you're doing. And the MCQs, I like the MCQs better because it takes accounting and CPA exam concepts and puts them within the context of how they're actually tested on the exam. So if you're on Facebook Live, say hey. You can ask me a question if you want. We had a lot of questions last time. This time, not so many so far. Doofy says, hi, Jeff. According to the analysis I got with my regulation score, my weakness is in simulations and property. It says property taxes, but I think they mean property transactions. My Becker access has expired. I was thinking about purchasing just the Ninja MCQs. My question is, does it come with simulations, or do I have to supplement it with any of your other products? I still have my Becker textbooks. Yes, Ninja MCQ comes with 1,900 reg questions and 74 regulation simulations. Make sure that if you are going to just use MCQs as your different strategy this time, make sure that you still go back through your book and that you take good notes and take it again. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, you can see my my red neck. I am literally a redneck, as if the beard didn't give it away. And so I do that when I get nervous. So I break out. So I hope that's helpful. Sean says, any advice with 1 week left for FAR? Do you suggest hitting government and not-for-profit hard? As I've heard, those are heavily tested. Should I practice a lot of sims? Governmental accounting and not-for-profit accounting are both about 20% of your overall FAR score. And so only skip them if you want to fail. Although I did skip non-for-profit accounting, not a best practice. I was running out of time and had to do it. But I would hit them both pretty hard. So yes, they are heavily tested. Should you practice a lot of sims? I would practice 5 to 10 sims at most is my recommendation over the topics that you think are kind of your bread and butter topics, bonds, inventory, etc. Nathan says, I'm currently faced with a difficult decision and would appreciate your advice. I graduated with my undergrad in January 2015 and worked at a small firm for 10 months. This last October, I left for an entry-level position at a top 20 firm in their audit and tax group. During busy season, I prepared over 175 partnership, corporate, and income tax returns and worked on 2 real estate audits, 5 reviews and comps in the retail and consumer products industry, and did a lot of other stuff. About a month ago, several staff, including myself, were laid off. I was told they were overstaffed and needed to cut to payroll. So I am unsure as to whether to look for a new position now or pass the CPA exam beforehand. The test makers will be changing the format of the exams this coming March/April. And I personally know 2 partners at Big 4 and 2 at a top 10. A friend of mine who is a manager recommended that I should begin to interview as soon as possible instead of passing the CPA. Yes, I agree with that. Well, first of all, there will be a gap in your employment record. And so if you say I took time off to study, they might wonder why you couldn't handle them both. So if you can't handle them both, and maybe you can't handle the workload of tax season, etc., even though you've already done that, they weren't there to see it. They don't know your work ethic. They don't know if you came in at noon on Saturdays or were there at 8 o'clock like everyone else. And also, if you take time off to study for the CPA exam, if you're like me, there's a good chance that you'll sit on your couch and eat Cheetos all day and watch Netflix. Because it's like, hey, I have time, and then pretty soon 1 month turns into 5 months and you're a mess. So I would jump back in, get a new job, and study at the same time. Omar says, what strategies to study for regulation, what to know, what are the main subjects? Well, the easy answer is you need to know them all. Obviously, you know that. For tax, individual tax is a very important topic. You will need to know that heavily. You will need to know individual tax inside and out. For like corporate tax, and so corporate tax has C Corp, S Corp, you have your partnerships, estate tax. I don't think regulation jumps into the minutia as much on those topics. I think, one mistake that people make is they underestimate how many business law and ethics/professional responsibilities questions they will get on exam day, and so that's like combined 40% of your exam, give or take. And so make sure that you don't focus completely on tax and then like a week out decide to kind of cram over agency law and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's helpful. But so they are all important. Some are more heavily tested than others, as evidenced by the CSO, soon to be Blueprint, but definitely hit individual tax hard. Make sure that you really, really, really know your basis. So property contributed to corporation, partnership, all that good stuff, like kind exchanges, and then all of your business law, the UCC, and all that good stuff. All right. Thomas says on Facebook Live, what specific topics should I focus on the days? Excuse me. I should have muted my mic. What specific topics should I focus on the days leading up to my auditing exam? Well, okay. I think people go into auditing not fully grasping the role that internal control plays in the audit. Because if internal control is really bad, then you have a higher control risk, and then that affects your substantive testing. And so the role that internal control plays with the entire audit process, and also, the audit risk formula, control risk, inherent risk, detection risk. Detection risk is the only thing that the auditor can control. So some accounts, some transactions are just more inherently risky. Control risk, they can't control risk. They can just evaluate it. So detection risk is the only thing that they can control, and you can lower that by the number of substantive procedures that they do. So understanding just the relationships is really important. If I were to focus on just out of the blue one thing, I would look at audit sampling. So make sure that you hit audit sampling really hard, and also internal control. I think you already knew that, and so I don't know if that was helpful, but hopefully that helps a little bit. All right, Pablo. Hello, Jeff. I took FAR in late April and received a 67, with my weak areas being in financial statement analysis and specific transactions and events. My strong suit is government and not-for-profit, since I work for a public accounting firm. I began studying for auditing shortly after I took FAR. My question is, should I reset my FAR progress data, so that he's talking about Ninja MCQ, so that I can refresh my memory with everything FAR related? I logged in over 130 hours and never got to the review phase. So you scored a 67 in FAR. So, and then now you're moving on to auditing. The question is, do you hit reset on your progress? So this goes for whether or not you're using Ninja MCQ or any other software. Yeah, you need to start from scratch. So if your software allows you to reset your data, do that, but don't. So you scored a 67. Don't jump back into your MCQ. Hit reset. Start from scratch, and so start from the beginning with FAR, and regardless if you score a 67 or a 74. Thomas says that was helpful. Okay, cool. Nicholas on Facebook Live. I failed the CPA exam multiple times. Historically in school, I've been a terrible test taker. Why should I continue? All right. So, well, first of all, Nicholas, there's a lot of people who feel the same way as you, and school release is tomorrow, so there'll be a lot of people who go to bed tonight wondering the same thing. So it all comes down to this. Are you going to let the AI CPA beat you? Do you want to be interviewing for jobs 5-10 years from now and walk into an interview knowing ahead of time that you're going to have to explain to them and convince them why you couldn't pass the CPA exam and why they should consider you over a job candidate who has? And even if you do something unrelated and never take a job position where the CPA certification, or even just passing the exam, even if you never get licensed, even if you go into an unrelated field, it will always kick you that you didn't pass. And so people who pass, or people who fail 10 times, there was one lady who failed like 28 times, and she ended up passing. And so, like a year after you're all done, you will not remember all of these failures. Or, hindsight is 20/20. The past is nostalgic. People in my age group, makes me sound old. I'm a Gen Xer, so people, it's easy to look back in the 90s and think, man, things were so much better back in the 90s. The music was so much better. Well, the 90s had a lot of problems too. And so the CPA exam, you will, long after you pass, you will look back and you won't think about all these hard times. You will think about, man, I kind of miss getting up and studying in the morning. Well, maybe not that, but I kind of miss feeding my brain. And so maybe I should start reading some business books because I really enjoyed the learning aspect. And so if you're ever considering truly quitting, I would take 3 months off and I would buy a new study course. I would do anything that it takes for mentally wiping the slate clean. And there are people who pass 2 sections and consider quitting because, man, they can't pass far or whatever. Well, you have to mentally wipe the slate clean instead of and think of it from the perspective, wow, I only have 2 sections left to pass, instead of, man, I passed 2, but I can't pass these other 2. So I don't know if that's helpful. Don't let the AICPA beat you. I mean, it's not like the AICPA is your enemy, but it helps to create some enemy who's trying to keep you down and get you pissed off, get you organized, and it gives you a mental foe to go after, when in most cases your actual foe is probably yourself. So it wasn't my case anyway. Monica, hello, Monica. Hello again. Strategies to study for FAR, what to know, what are the main subjects. I just covered that in a previous question, so that will give you some incentive. But the long and short of it is to just follow the Ninja framework. So, and the main subjects for FAR: inventory, bonds, lease amortization, capital versus operating lease. And someone asked about governmental accounting and not-for-profit accounting. That's 20% of your exam. Basic GAAP versus IFRS differences. So, I mean, I don't know if that's helpful, but Ben says, I finished auditing in 2 hours and was fairly confident. Is that as bad of a thing as people make it sound? Ben, if there was one exam that you said, hey, it took me 2 hours to finish and I'm freaking out about it, I would have said that's auditing. And because I am the world's slowest test taker, and when I took it, I think they gave you 4.5 hours. I finished it in 3.5 hours. And on the other exams, I was someone who they had to drag me out of the testing room. I mean, I oftentimes wasn't able to hit quit exam because I was entering stuff at the last moment, and I finished it an hour early. And so I would not read into that. You're welcome, Nicholas. Keep after it. Like I said, you might, go, if you haven't read the CPA exam survival guide, go to another71.com/free, and it is free. And there's an area that I cover failing the CPA exam, and mostly it has some strategic things on what to do differently, but also a mental checklist if you find yourself in a perpetual state of failing. So you'll be all right. So Justin says, I take auditing, still on Facebook Live. I take auditing Monday. I rewrote my notes into fact nuggets and scored an 83 on the practice exam. I know you're feeling on practice exams. Yes. For those who don't know, I hate practice exams. Don't do them. Just don't do practice exams. Any last minute, even though Ninja MCQ has them. Any last minute suggestions for my final push? A lot of MCQ and note scanning. Yes. Familiarizing myself with the authoritative literature. Do it briefly. Go to the AICPA sample exam. Practice. Just putting it in there. Make sure that you know how to do it. That's it. Thanks for all your efforts. Well, you're welcome. Thank you for watching. I'm glad someone actually showed up to ask me questions. So yeah, a lot of multiple choice questions. So start with your weakest area first in auditing. So and how you know what your weakest area is, you think, I really hope they don't ask me too many questions about that topic. Start there and work a 20-question mini testlet over that topic. Score 70 to 75%, arbitrary number, and then move backwards to your next weakest area. Monica says, I'm loving the Ninja notes and the MCQ and the MCQ audio. Thank you, Monica. And which reminds me, in the last podcast, she asked if I had any discounts, and I said no. I don't have a promo code box anymore, but I did say that if you email me support@another71.com and say, hey, I listened to the podcast and I got the Ninja notes and the Ninja MCQ, I will send you the Ninja MCQ audio for free, and that goes for anyone. Bara says, are individual still on Facebook Live? Are individual scores released yet or tomorrow? They will be released tonight about 1 a.m. Eastern. So technically tomorrow, or if you're on the West Coast, tonight. Edgardo, still on Facebook Live. Hey, Jeff, I took auditing last Monday, give or take. Questions kept getting more challenging, got hammered on. That's a good sign. So your exams start out at medium difficulty, and if you do well, they ratchet up to difficult on your next testlet. If they got harder, that's a good sign. Harder questions are harder, but they're worth more points, so that is a good sign. Omar says, practice exams are a waste of time. Yeah, and the reason why practice exams are a waste of time is because, first of all, it's going to take 3 to 4 hours of your life, so 3 to 4 hours of your study time. So that's at least 1 day of study time for those of us who work full time, and that's if you do it all in one block. And you don't get immediate feedback, and it's not the actual AI CPA scoring. So who knows what the margin of error is there? Just don't do. Friends don't let friends highlight. Friends don't let friends do practice exams. Alva, Facebook Live. Where can we email you again? support@another71.com. So, or if you have a podcast question, go to. If you have a podcast question and don't want to submit it at the Ask Jeff little box on the site, you can also email a podcast question to support@another71.com, and I will tag it for a podcast. And so my last podcast prior to the last one was in March, and so I've done podcasts back to back. So hopefully you guys can keep me accountable, and I'll keep doing them. I think Facebook Live helps me because I tell people when I'm going to be on, so that I have to show up. Leanne writes in, what order do you recommend taking the CPA exams with all the new 2017 changes coming? Okay. So I did some research, and my recommendation has always been FAR, auditing, regulation, and BEC. That is the order that you should take the exams. FAR, auditing, regulation, BEC. However, in light of the 2017 CPA exam changes, so if you are still going to be taking exams, or you expect to reasonably be taking exams as of April 2017, then you need to do it in this order: BEC, regulation, auditing, and FAR. And here's why. So BEC is dropping from 72 questions to 62 questions. That's a good thing. And they still have 3 written communication questions, just like now. However, BEC is getting 4 to 5 simulations, which will account for 35% of your grade. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's a bad thing. So you might as well get BEC out of the way so that you don't have to deal with those simulations, because if I were the AI CPA, I would throw some cost accounting simulations in there, and make them pre-test, of course. But like, who wants to do a cost accounting simulation? So knock BEC out first, then regulation. And the reason for that is regulation is getting a few more questions, but they're going from 7 sims to 8 or 9 sims. Not as big of a change. Auditing is getting less questions, like 18 fewer questions, but FAR is getting 24 fewer questions and going from 7 sims to 8 or 9 sims. So normally I advocate putting FAR off, or taking FAR first, so that you knock the beast out of the way for your 18-month clock. In light of 2017 CPA exam changes, take FAR last. But if you're starting fresh in 2017, or as of April 2017, then it goes back to FAR, auditing, regulation, BEC, because it doesn't matter. So to recap, take BEC first, take FAR last, if you're starting now and still have FAR to take. Hope that was helpful. George, Facebook Live, says, I don't know how to start and what material to use. George, I would download my CPA exam survival guide. That's where I would start. And I lay out how I recommend studying for the CPA exam, which is the Ninja framework. And it's different than what most courses recommend, because I think it's I think it's more efficient and effective. So, and then which material you should use, I talk about that in the book, in the CPA exam survival guide. And so some things to look at when studying picking a course. What's your budget? What is your learning style? Do you want videos? Do you want books? Do you want a big honking phone book of a book? Or do you want something trimmed down in digital, like the Ninja book? And if you can't stand the sound of my voice, you won't like my materials. And so you need to know if you like the instructor's mannerisms. So some people have little things that freak them out about their instructors, and they post about it in the forum. So if you don't like my mannerisms, you won't like me. And if you can tolerate me, you might like it. So that's what I would do. So go to another71.com/free. You get the CPA exam survival guide and some other free goodies. So that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I hope that helps. Monica says, I'm loving these podcasts. Thank you, Monica. I enjoy doing them. It helps create just more fresh content for people, but also, I just like doing it. And George says, thanks for all your help and dedication. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it. So Sean writes in, hey, Jeff, you got your audit MCQs for my last test, and I think they really helped out. I'm getting the results in a couple of weeks. I just started regulation today, about 25 days out. So without much knowledge about reg, besides a couple of classes in college, how should I approach this? Should I skip my Becker videos and go straight to the MCQs without really knowing anything? I'm confused on this approach in this time frame. So 25 days, that's about 3.5 weeks, give or take. Yes, you have the Becker videos. And if that is your main course, you should watch them and you should take notes. Do not highlight, take notes. So 25 days. So how do you take regulation in 25 days, 3.5 weeks? I recommend normally about 7 weeks for regulation. So I'd spend a week and a half on the content. So a week and a half nailing the content and taking intense notes. So you need to get through all of your Becker videos and take all of your notes in a week and a half. Then you have Ninja MCQ, switch over to Ninja MCQ, spend another week and a half on Ninja MCQ, use it as an extension of your learning. Don't test yourself, use it to learn the information. You'll get you will miss a lot of questions to start out with, and then you'll build your knowledge base. So So that is, so that's two, yeah. Back up. A week on the concepts, a week and a half on the MCQs, that's 2.5 weeks, and then spend a week reviewing. And so studying your notes nonstop and working your weak points in your MCQ, starting your weak points and working backwards. And that's 3.5 weeks if my Spidey math is correct under pressure. So not ideal, but definitely doable if you just really, really work hard, 30-hour weeks. How often do you podcast? Not as often as I should. This is podcast number 70. So I refuse to go back and listen to my old podcasts because they're terrible, I'm sure. But yeah, this podcast number 70, I need to do it more often. But yeah. So love your audio comments, very realistic. Such as when you explain so Monica says, such as when you explain depreciation methods and how to easily remember them on the exam date. Thank you, Monica. Yeah, and I appreciate the feedback. So, all right. So, to get the most out of she's talking about the Ninja Audio. To get the most out of the Ninja Audio, listen to it nonstop. Listen to it as many times as you can between when you get it and exam day. So every time you are at the gym, when you're sitting at your desk working, if you can put earbuds in, listen to it. I know that I'm not the most exciting person in the world to listen to, and you'd much rather listen to your playlist on Spotify or Pandora or whatever. But for a short period of time, listen to me as much as you can tolerate it, and because things will stick in the audio, especially if you listen to it like 5 times. So, and then when you pass the exam, then you can stop listening to me. So, which I promise you that you will. And especially if you listen to the audio with a spouse or your kids in the car, I promise you they will be happy about that. Okay, Spencer on Facebook Live. My last section is far, and in 3.5 weeks, is it possible to pass with only MCQ and Ninja Audio? Is it possible to pass? Yes, because people have done it. Is it ideal? No, but that's just, I don't know, part of me just not wanting to like overpromise or something. But people do it. People especially pass with Ninja Book and Ninja MCQ. But people pass just with Ninja MCQ, and how they do it is they treat it as a review course. So in most cases, you will do your practice sessions with your software and just kind of treat it as like a quiz. If you go all MCQ instead of videos, you need to digest each question, slow down, take notes, write down the little fact nuggets, and use it as your course and build your knowledge base from there. Definitely possible. And so, yep, definitely possible. 3.5 weeks, that's tight. Justin, would you recommend a review course such as Roger over something like Becker for someone who gets distracted easily? Roger seems so much more engaging from the sample videos I've watched of both. Okay. Okay. So each review course has their own strengths, and I run a CPA review course website, and customers of all companies use my forum, and I'm also a competitor. So it's kind of a weird dynamic there. And I think each program has their strengths and weaknesses, and I tend to only talk about the course's strengths. I'll leave it to others, customers, to talk about any weaknesses. I think Roger is a very good instructor. And if you like his sample videos, and if you like the other feedback in the forum, then you should go for it. If you like the demos, if you like, but that goes for any course. So if you like the instructor, and you get a good feel about the about the materials and the content, and most courses use AICPA released questions. And if you read all the fine print, if you know whether or not it expires, whether or not you can get a refund if you're like, ooh, I don't like this. A lot more and more courses are offering free trials, so definitely check out the free trials. So at some point you have to commit, you have to go all in on a course, and you can't dabble among review courses when you're picking a course. Go all in. So if you like Roger, go with Roger. And if you like another course, go with another course. And but I think either of those two options are fine, and people pass with them every day. I hope that wasn't a non-answer, Justin, but I hope that helps. Locke, or is it Loke? Facebook Live. Sorry, I'm from Kansas. I'm not as cultured. On the Ninja MCQ, I'm getting average score of 80% and 90%. 80%, 90% training score. Did all the questions. 4,700 attempts. Feels like I memorized all the questions. Should I be using another test bank? My FAR test is in 18 days. Okay. Normally, an 80% to 90% training score in Ninja MCQ is indicative of, hey, you're really doing well. And it might be in this case. However, one thing that I see with people who do a lot of questions, so it's like, they, I forget how many questions are in FAR, like 1,700 or something. I should know that, but I don't. I forget. But you have done 2 to 3 times the number of questions in FAR, and so, like you said, there is a distinct possibility that you are memorizing the questions, which is a danger sign. And so, should you get another test bank? I don't know. That's more money and another investment, and so that's up to you. Before I did that, I would reset my FAR progress. So you can reset your progress, and if you do another 1,000 questions and you're still if you're still scoring in the 80s, I think you're okay. And so Locke just said, okay, so it's Locke. Sorry, Locke. It's not Loke like Tone Loke. All right. I would reset your progress data, see how you're doing. And if you find, this is a really long-winded answer, if you find in scatterbrained, if you find that you know the answer because you've seen it before, hit eject, get another test bank. If you find that you know the answer because conceptually, like you know how to do it, I think you're okay. Monica says, yes, my husband and daughter make fun of me about my Ninja audio. I believe it. Adriana, still on Facebook Live. My reg exam is on September 8th. Is it possible to pass with just Ninja notes, bullets, and MCQs? I didn't get much out of my video lectures. Yes, it's possible. Yes, people do it. Make sure you use Ninja MCQ as your main study course and read the Ninja notes as many times as possible and watch Ninja Blitz the last couple of days before your exam. Justin says, thanks, it did help. So all good. Appreciate your help. Awesome. Appreciate the questions because nothing would be worse than doing like a live thing. It's like crickets. So I appreciate you humoring me and asking me questions. Okay. All right. And for the person who says I smack my lips too much, I think I'm up to like 40. So if it was a drinking game, everyone would definitely be trashed. Jeff writes in, I am close to obtaining my CPA license from Washington State. Per the Washington State rule, I have the responsibility to select and engage a CPA who has been licensed at least 5 years to evaluate my experience and my competence. I called the State Board of Accountancy and asked what type of responsibility the verifying CPA needs to have and how to find one. The State Board answered my call and said that the only responsibility of the verifying CPA is to determine the competence of the candidate using their judgment via knowing or interviewing this person. My CPA who prepared my income tax is not licensed, or hasn't been licensed for 5 years. And other CPAs that I approach are not willing to help. Okay, Anthony asks that I ask around. I need help. Jeff, if I were in your shoes, so it's August right now, tax season is around the corner, so I think that you can have your sign-off by April simply by going in. So I don't know if you have a full-time job right now, but going in after hours and helping them during their tax season. So find some small mom and pop firm who's been doing taxes forever. They're licensed CPA. They've been licensed for 85 years, et cetera, and go in, be a real asset to that company. So tax season is horrible. Anyone who's done it, I've done 2 tax seasons myself. I did enough to know that wasn't like, yeah. And so I escaped. So people are working during tax season, work until 8 o'clock at night, midnight, later, whatever. And so if you can go in and lighten their workload and be an asset to them, and I can't guarantee you, but it's very likely that they will sign off on your experience if the criteria that you laid out are in fact what Washington requires. And when you're interviewing for the after hours job, or going on Saturdays, Sundays, whatever, I would say, hey, part of my expectation is that at the end of this that you'll sign off. So I think you will you'll find success there. Avi, I'm taking FAR in 3.5 weeks. Can I pass just using the Ninja MCQ? Yes. Ideally, you would get more materials like a book and other supplementary materials to back up what you learn in Ninja MCQ. If you are dead set on only buying Ninja MCQ, can you pass using only Ninja MCQ? Yes, but it's not a best practice. But people do it. Make sure that you grind. Make sure that you do so many multiple choice questions and spend so much time in it. You hate the software. You hate me. And you hate the word ninja, and you're done with it. So, all right, jumping into the another71.com forum. So there's a forum user there, and username E. Brestovansky. Sorry. A little background. I graduated with a BS in accounting in 2013 and started working in tax. There's a question about whether or not you should get an MBA. I started working in tax at a public accounting firm in December. I'm still working at a firm, and I passed all 4 of my exam back in February 2016, right before I went on maternity leave. Perfect timing. I still need to get 28 credits, so that's for the 150 hours, 6 of which need to be in accounting in order to be licensed. My question is, should I get an MBA, which is 36 additional credits for $20,000, or get the credits via another BS degree, which is 30 credits at $8,100? I have a very busy lifestyle with 2 kids, work full-time, so it's not an option for me just to focus on schooling. I'm going to be going part-time, 1 to 2 classes a semester. My goal is ultimately to become a partner at the firm. Is the cost of the MBA worth it? I almost feel like I should get the credits to get the license and save the $12,000. I wholeheartedly agree with that. So the question is, if you already had your 150 hours, would you go back and get an MBA? No, you wouldn't. Most people wouldn't, and most people should not, because if you already have your CPA designation, it's not like so specifically you work for a firm and you want to make partner. It's not like they're going to be like, hey, we love the work that you're doing. You are bringing in a lot of new business. But you know what? You just don't have that nondescript MBA from a college that I haven't heard of. So that's why you're not going to make partner. No, that won't happen. And conversely, it's not like they're going to say, hey, you're horrible to work with, you're lazy, and you don't bring in any money to the firm. But you have an MBA, so we're going to let this one slide. So welcome to the partnership team. That's not going to happen either. And so save the $1,200, save the extra year of your life, and if you want something that will help you to become a partner, instead of spending the extra year of your life getting that MBA, go join Rotary. Go attend all of the social functions for your state CPA society. If your city is on the border between a couple of states, and you have like 2 state CPA societies, like within, I don't know, 100-mile radius, join both of them and try to get clients from both. And so you'll be much more valuable to your firm than getting an MBA. So you'll get a much higher ROI on your time, and I don't think you will ever recover that money in terms of increased dollars in your bank account solely due to getting that MBA. I don't think you'll ever recover that money. All right, final question for the podcast, and then we'll wrap it up with any more Facebook Live questions if we have any. 75 is the goal on the another71.com forum. Any advice on how to motor through this material? So the question was about business law for regulation. Extremely disappointing to see it takes up half of my Wiley material. I was under the impression that this section would focus predominantly on tax, which would play to my advantage. Well, it's not just Wiley, it's any review course is going to be about 40% business law and ethics/professional responsibility. You cannot just motor through the material. You have to, if not 40% of the time, spend a third of your time on the business law, ethics, professional responsibilities area. Because if you don't, you can ace the tax section, and on exam day, you're going to be kicking yourself because it's going to seem like every other question is over business law and professional responsibilities, and that's because 40% of the content is supposed to be over that much. So you cannot skip business law for regulation if you want to pass. All right, wrapping up on Facebook Live. Being an accounting and finance major, how would I be able to transition into IT audit? Just want your point of view. Well, that means that I never went to work for a big firm. So if you want the perspective of someone who works for a big firm, that's not me. My impression is that you go to a firm and they assign you where they assign you. You can tell them kind of what your preference is, but they just stick you where they stick you. If you want to go work for a publicly traded company and go work in internal audit, which I don't think I would do. I worked for 2 publicly traded companies, and I would not want to work in internal audit. And for those of you who work in internal audit, I'm sure your internal audit area is great and it's the best thing ever. I would not have wanted to work there. So, well, for one thing, everyone in the company kind of hates you. So it's like working for a police department and being in internal affairs. Like, everyone hates you. So anyway, just my thoughts based on purely anecdotal evidence. So, All right, everyone. Well, thank you for submitting your questions to the podcast. If you want to be on the podcast, you can go to another71.com. Click in the upper right-hand corner, click Ask Jeff, and it will appear in a future edition of the podcast. And I promise I will do them on a regular basis, or your money back. And you can also shoot me an email. If you can't remember that, you can shoot me an email, support@another71.com. And if it's a podcast question, I probably won't reply to it. I'll just tag it for the next podcast, and I will answer it there. And for everyone on Facebook Live, I appreciate you asking me some questions and all that. So thank you, everyone. Have a happy score release. If you end up south of a 75, hopefully that won't happen to anyone. If you happen to be south of a 75, and the number one thing I can advise is to read my CPA exam survival guide on how to recover from failing the CPA exam. And it's just an approach to how to get up off the mat and get back to fighting. I think you'll find it helpful. Be good, everyone. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.